Welcome back to the Inner Shift podcast. I'm Amy Friesen. Grab a coffee, grab some time, and sit down. We have another awesome guest with us. Hello, Kimothy.
Well, hello. I'm wondering, this might be a first. I've never seen a podcast where somebody joins you from their car. So, so for those that don't know, I'm traveling across North America and it's raining outside. So my campground is a little soggy. So that's why I'm in here. But so just in full disclosure, because Amy, of course, knows this, because we are good friends. We talk about absolutely everything, including my mental health as it pertains to living in my car and deciding to go for a very, very long drive. And we just feel that, we're here and we're better together. So we're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the really, really ugly.
Well, yes, we are. On
Yes,
that
we are.
note, why don't we invite our guests in? Today we're joined by
These
another
are good.
friend and
Good.
podcast builder on our team. Her name is Susan Marsh-Marconi, and Timothy met with her and was working with her on a Canadian sporting event. And Susan calls herself an unapologetic advocate. Hi, Susan. How are you?
Very good, thank you.
Tell
Nice
us
to see you
more.
both.
What's nice to see you more. I'm just jumping in. I'm ready. Tell me
Yeah.
more about being an unapologetic advocate. It is a mouthful as well. So I don't know if you say that as your slogan, but it's a lot to wrap your mouth around.
Well, I was trying to figure out what would be perfect for me, and I think that is kind of coins exactly how I feel about myself. Um, it's basically proudly owning my narrative, um, and using my resilience to drive change, and refusing to be silenced or diminished by those who seek to overlook and to erase my experiences. It's kind of in a nutshell all of my life experiences and how as women our experiences aren't valued and appreciated. It's kind of
You were so helpful for me, Susan, because obviously we became friends at a major sporting event. But then when, if you're just joining us, I had a major car accident, not my fault, almost 3 years ago now. And Susan was amazing with me because I had concussion syndrome, and I just kind of thought, okay, well, I have a concussion. And then it kept going and kept going. And finally, my medical team realized that it was going to be a little more complicated. And Susan, you were so good with me. Do you want to share with everybody how you gained the expertise and how to help people like me who have brain injuries?
yeah. I have a daughter and she was 15 at the time, so this was 15 years ago on February 18th, 2010. She was in a car accident as a passenger, and I got a call at work and basically saying that my daughter is convulsing. She was in a car accident, and she's convulsing, and I need to get to the hospital. Um, that was a really terrifying experience, and I got driven there to Chio. So the little parts of it wasn't really good. So when you have a daughter that's in a car accident, there's lots of things that happen. They don't give you very much detail except for that, by the way, you need to go to the hospital. I get to the CHIO, and because I'm a good follower or whatever, I was stood in line waiting for someone to service me, and I said, "Oh my God!" So I started wandering through the halls, and a nurse came up to me and said, "Are you here because your daughter was in a car accident?" I said, "Yes." And then immediately she took me to the resuscitation room,
Oh,
and
no
yeah,
one.
yeah, and I was immediately met with police officers and paramedics. And they asked me a bunch of things like, was she wearing her seatbelt? I had no idea. I thought she was in school.
Mm.
She ended up going to her boyfriend's house at the time for lunch, and when she was coming back, and all those little details I find out afterwards. And then once I was in that resuscitation room, so this is where, Timothy, the shock of this is what kind of catapulted me to reach out to you, because there's lots of things that one doesn't know. So when I went in the resuscitation room, I was paralyzed, and the nurses asked me to come closer because they had everybody around her body. And then she was wearing this big, I think it's yellow neck brace. And as they're going through to make sure that the bones and stuff were healed, nurses and doctors would go away. But she was screaming. She was screaming like a crazy person. And I was actually afraid. And they told me that they had to sedate her with medication to calm her down because she was very combative. So I'm listening to all the details of what was happening. And they thought originally there was a snowboard in the back, that it must have clipped her head, which caused the open wound in the back of her head. Later on, we find out that has nothing to do with her concussion. So after they determined, they went through CT scans, and they couldn't really determine any bleeds or anything because she has braces on at the time. So they're kind of guessing what's happening, but she's starting to come through, and they bring us to another room. So they were doing stitches in her head, and I don't know what prompted my husband to take photos, because we thought, oh, she'll never know that she's had stitches on the top of her head. Well, later on, we find out that that's very valuable information, is taking photos of your injuries. Number one, we did it just vicariously. And then we were this about, I would say, 9 hours later, they handed me a piece of paper that said mild concussion. And if you exhibit signs of throwing up or dizziness or disorientation, come back to the hospital. So they were discharging her. And I swear to God, we maybe did 10 steps and she started throwing up. So, but there was nobody there. So I immediately went back and said, she's throwing up. And they took us back, and they gave her some IV stuff. And I guess because she hadn't eaten. So that's what they were kind of assuming. And then from there, we left home, and all these weird things happened. And within the first few days, I knew there was something wrong. There was something more than this mild concussion. And so I reached out to a lawyer who was a friend of ours, and that's kind of how it went.
Because this is a mental health show, is that not only for her, but for your entire family, all of a sudden, you having to care for her, like, how that becomes a mental health issue and not a physical issue, as what happened to me.
Well, the mental health issue is watching your daughter be changed and become somebody else. It just, that happens. You no longer become the mother, you become the caregiver. And there's a big distinction, because, there's things that you have to do. Like, you have to do what's right. And some of the parts that were right is scheduling appointments for her to go to be looked after. And then and the constant calling, she's constantly calling me at work. I'm trying to, continue on with my job and stuff like that. And I had other children at the time, so and I was pregnant at the time, so it's about juggling my pregnancy with my these numerous appointments that need to be to adhere to. And also, I'm married. Like, I had no time for my husband. I had no time for sports that I absolutely love. I'm just surviving. For 10 years, I was just surviving, trying to do what's right. We had a lawsuit, so there was things that I had to do, which were really uncomfortable, but I had to get them done. So my mental health suffered so badly that I was having night terrors. I had night terrors. First of all, it started every couple months, and then it got to a point that was like every day, and I had to go and find out what was wrong with me. So the mental health piece is really important, because now your life isn't just yourself; it's actually making sure that you're doing the right thing for your child and your family, all the while putting your mental health in the back seat.
Yeah. I'm looking at Amy, and I know that I mean, I've known this story, but this is a lot of new information for
It's a
Amy
lot of
about
new
the early
information.
days.
That's
It's a lot.
wild, Susan. That's wild. Thank you for sharing that with us. Um, I also know, because a bird told me at one point, that you are also a champion and relentless communicator with Indigenous cultures, that you have Indigenous children, but you're not Indigenous. So, how does that affect you? Like, there's so many issues with all different types of populations. And I would suspect that if I had a child that was not from my background, similar, not exactly the same, but similar to my daughter's learning French. I do not speak French, and we are struggling because we're trying to be that advocate, trying to do all that stuff, and that's a language as a second language. So I'm sure that you've got lots more to talk about because it's not exactly the same situation, but how do you feel about that? Does it affect your mental health? Is it challenging? Can you tell us more about that?
Well, there's an intersection between my Indigenous children and myself. I'm adopted. So my erasure from culture, I get it. I understand it. And I know how important as a mother, culture is to your children and the legacy they will continue to flourish. And so it's really important for me to learn all aspects. So I'm very blessed with having a mother-in-law who really opened my eyes to all of the injustices when it comes to her culture, so much so that she was embarrassed and she didn't teach her children about the Indigenous ways, which
Mm.
I find really sad. And so I feel it's my duty, but also it's like full circle. Then my children have a piece of something of their father's legacy, and I'm trying to find mine. So it's kind of this I don't know. It's a full loop story, and I'm still trying to investigate. I'm Croatian, and I didn't get that opportunity. And you learn a lot from your culture. You learn about who you are. You identify with others. I want to make sure that my children, because they're white passing, which means that they don't look Indigenous. So there's a whole, um, I don't even know the right word for it, but they don't feel like they're part of that culture because they don't look it. Just like I don't feel like I'm part of, the culture that I have because I don't have one. Um, and the mental health piece is I didn't get it. So that's another avenue of soreness for me that I want to ensure that people's culture are appreciated and valued because I didn't get it. It's kind of how I feel about it.
We, before this hour is up, we're going to talk about the other thing, Susan, that brought us together. But first, before we get there, and it's rough stuff. Before we get there, how are you doing? Because uh, this is a lot, and it affects your mental health. So, how do you manage all of this?
For me, I realized very young that exercise and health is important for me. So when I go down sort of like the pit of despair, I go back to what always works for me, and that is making sure that I'm exercising and I'm eating well. And when you have that as your baseline, then other things can help function. Then you can reach out. To support groups, to your friends, to, professionals. But I think for me, that is my baseline. And how I'm doing like everybody else. Good days, bad days. You and you're the same age as me, Timothy. So you know how the aches and pains of being in your 50s there. So it's just kind of navigating that. And then also the stage in life that you're at, like you want to make a difference. So you kind of throw that all in. But I guess overall, I'm in a plateau, if you will. If you're going to ask me how I'm doing, I'm kind of plateau. I'm not down, but I'm not up, but I'm kind of coasting.
Yeah, Amy deals with people who are obviously going through major life changes as part of her profession, feeling sandwiched.
Yeah.
And Amy, I'm going to ask you a question, which is when people go through a major life change, um, like Susan did with her daughter, like she is with her own mental health, um, is it unusual to feel alone in that? And I mean, Susan talking about exercising, but uh, I'm assuming it can feel isolating when you go through a major, major change like that in your family.
I would say that, like many of the other topics that we've discussed on and off camera, it can feel very lonely because you don't know who can understand so that you can talk to anybody. Susan, you've got your own magic mixture of things contributing to your mental health, and it's hard. Or I found it hard dealing with other caregivers, dealing with my own life and all that. I found it really hard to find others that have my mixture of stuff or enough of it that when I tell them things, it makes sense enough that I don't have to re-explain my situation. Is that you're nodding? So is that kind of how you feel as well?
It's 100% true. And sometimes, like my girlfriends say, "Hey, how can I help?" Actually, I don't even know how they can help. It's like you said, we have to have a like-mindedness for people to come across and get it. And again, that repeating of story is
Exhausting.
yeah, it is. I totally get it. That's yeah.
Yeah, it's
So,
go ahead.
Susan, how can we help?
I don't know. Like I don't know. I actually can't answer that question as
Yeah,
simple as that
uh,
is. Like,
it's what I find interesting because you helped me a long time ago, and I don't even know if you remember the exact moment that we shared history, because I do. Uh, because you know what helped me? Um, Actually, let me hang on and tell people out there. For those that don't know, I spoke out as only I can do on a national broadcast about childhood sexual trauma. It's like go big or go home, right? And I got, you know, basically thousands of responses to that. Um, and I spoke out to start advocating for children and to demand change and stuff like that, long before Me Too. And I remember the exact moment that I found out that Susan was another Me Tooer because how you helped Susan was simply by saying, I get it. I get it. Um, do you know, or did you know until this very moment how much you helped me just by standing up and bravely saying it happened to me too?
no, but I know that the power of the story affects people differently. So I'm never afraid to share what I've experienced if it just helps one. So I appreciate you telling me that. I didn't realize the magnitude. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. Do you want to, and I'm not pressuring you, but do you want to tell people what happened to you?
Well, my story was over 30 years ago, and it was in a university, and I was raped and at a frat house. And my story was actually a national story, and I was my name was put, wasn't out there in the papers or whatever. And I was young, like, and I got no support. But I felt it was so important that I didn't want anybody else. I always think when something happens to me, I don't want anybody else to go through this. So I stood up for myself, and I didn't even ask my parents to come because I was so embarrassed and humiliated of what the experience was. That I guess word got out from the Women's Rights Crisis Center in Montreal, and when we went to court, they lined all of my side with all the frat people's side. So um, I,
Wow.
yeah, I end up losing, and I don't feel like I lost. I feel like I gained. I gained my voice that day. So because the world wasn't ready to make any changes to how they treat women. So
Yeah. Um, for me, Well, it's coming up to almost 50 years. I mean, I'll be 57 in July, so it's coming up to almost 50 years. And for me, it was, a culture of don't tell anybody. What would the neighbors think? It wasn't a person inside my family. It was the adult brother of my friend at a sleepover, right? And so I spoke out to tell parents, like, don't let your kids just go to sleepovers without knowing the family. It's like, oh, so and so's birthday party, and a bunch of little girls are going to go over to a house where we don't really know the family. So that was part of the reason why I spoke out. So um, I'm curious how you still have that compassion in your heart to help other people when, as we've learned, you've been hurt pretty badly and repeatedly in life.
Again, it goes back to being alone. When you're adopted, you're alone. Like you have been given away. So you're kind of this alone wolf kind of thing. And I don't want people to experience hardship. And so I don't know, that's part of my DNA. I don't know why I am the way I am. It's just that I just don't want anybody to go through what I have gone through. And if they're going through it, I want to share what I've experienced to lessen the pain. Because when you keep things, you know this, Timothy, when you keep it quiet and you don't talk about it, it festers. And so the more you can share, you kind of lighten your load, but in the same way, you're supporting others. Um, I learned like I suspect you're going to ask me like how I would what advice I'd probably give in the future. I have no regrets of all the experiences that I have experienced. I feel there's a lot of learning that I have experienced that I can share. Um, but so platforms like this is really helpful and unique for others because in our time we wouldn't talk about this kind of stuff. Like it took me a lot of years to even feel comfortable saying that that was me, the person that was, at that university. But the one good thing about that is that they became dry frats across the nation. So I can say that um, my experience changed that. So if nothing else, changed that.
That's wild. That's just, there's so much to intake in your story, Susan. I'm really happy that you've shared it with us. Um, I just, I feel for you because there's been other things in my life that I have been the only one or until I found other, like one or two other people. And it's really hard to walk that road on your own. And to your point, right? Like you're adopted, you've kind of taken on that lone wolf mentality, that independent person. And I too have that personality from my past, not the same as yours, but different. And we're used to just dealing with it. We're used to just sucking it up and dealing with it. We've talked on other shows and off camera and stuff about the medical system and like being advocates there. And we all have children we've had to advocate for. And I work with people who have seniors in their lives that they're advocating for. And it's just, it's difficult because we've done it ourselves alone this whole time. Not that we wouldn't have welcomed people, but to your point and what we're talking about, it's hard to get the information across so somebody understands. And really, if you tell your story for the how most time and you're continually and you happen to tell somebody that doesn't have enough of a hook to you, or enough of a background that they would understand conceptually. It's hard because sometimes, the best meaning people give terrible advice. And so, you put yourself out there as an independent person who has these different traumas, these different issues, this different lifestyle stuff, all of it. But you can kind of get off track or feel like you're not being heard if you happen to tell somebody that doesn't have enough of an experience that they can grasp what you're saying. Because, I've done that. And sometimes what comes back is more of a, oh, maybe you should try this. And it's kind of like more of a nice to have if you have like a normal life that is like, I don't know. Nobody has normal lives though. It's just kind of like a very compartmental viewpoint or response to someone who is in trauma or is in dealing with something, and you want to help them as a friend. I'm sure I've done it to people too. You want to help, but you just don't have enough background. So all that to say is hard to rehash that background over and over and over, especially when you're so used to being on your own. So
And actually, Susan, because I'm gonna get you to respond to it, of course, because I just wanted to add before you do that when you think everyone else is normal because they're keeping up this whole big facade of the perfect house and the perfect family and the perfect whatever, it makes you feel even more vulnerable because you think everybody else has their shit together and you're the only one that doesn't have your shit together. And, I have told Susan that I was really intimidated by her when we first started working together because she looked so. I'm not saying, Susan, that you don't have your shit together. I'm just saying you looked like, the perfect machine of, effective communicator and athlete, and everybody loved her. And, it was intimidating. And then when she opened up her heart, that's when, we were able to establish this bond. So, Susan, your thoughts on what Amy was saying?
Well, well, I kind of, this is what I feel like saying. I feel like saying, Timothy, your story on the national news actually spurred me to reach out to you. Because of your vulnerability, it allowed me to feel, oh, I'm not alone. Now, our circumstance is a little different, but the same thing happened. We were taken advantage of, and I thought, wow, how could I do that same thing? And then, I feel I must have put on a good face if you thought I was all put together, but because I'm very rigid and stuff, so that's just the way I am. And I think it's because when crisis happens to me, I always ask myself, do what's right and not what's easy. And I really filter that through. And so then I know that I can't sit still. I have to put one foot in front of the other. So when I'm trying to, like where Emmy was saying, saying the same story and people go just, yeah, that's a good idea. Or, I'm learning to just listen and try not to rescue. See, people who have gone through these traumas, they want to rescue sometimes. And I got caught in a lot of problems doing that because you can't watch someone suffer. But now the gift is to give them what they need and then watch what happens. So I guess that's the best way to respond.
Yeah, I think that's great advice because I find myself making that mistake a lot,
Mm.
um, where it's like, "Here's what I think you should do,"
Yeah.
instead of asking the questions of, you know, "So, how are you feeling about that?" Like, let's just say a divorce, for example, is, you know, um and I only pick that because 'cause I've done it twice, so I'm highly experienced. But, just you don't need advice from people. You just need to share that, even if it was your choice, you're still upending your life, obviously, because you weren't happy. And so, I really like what you just said there is that, that's like a tool I can use is just let people tell you how they feel. Don't tell them how they feel. You know, that's
Because I think that that's helps us because we're trying to fix ourselves or soothe ourselves, and by fixing others or trying to fix them, it somehow fixes us. And so, and even the question when the question, how you feeling? That's a open-ended, scary question for me to be answering
it's like
because
the worst question, isn't it? That's the
well,
worst.
yeah, it is. It's like, or what can I do for you? I have no idea. I'm just trying to navigate. Like for me, I'm a researcher. If I don't know, I'm checking it out. I'm figuring it out. I'm asking 1,000 questions. I'm, researching because no one really knows. What may be good for you may not be good for me, but it's good that you've shared that with me because that doesn't work. But then Timothy will give me something, and then maybe that hooks on to me because I think we're all here just to help each other out. And And we're all fumbling along the way. And I don't mind looking messy because I think I already look messy, but Timothy thinks I'm all put together. But, this is how I
I
feel.
sure do. I sure do. Well, because you know what Amy said about that question is because the answer is fine. How are you? I'm fine.
Yes.
I'm fine.
It's
How is
too
how's
complicated to get into. That's the
Yeah.
thing. How are you doing? I'm fine, which Timothy and I vowed not to say on this podcast, but in this context, like it's really hard to be like, I'm fine since you asked me like 4 days ago. Like the whole world has shifted twice and there's too many details in between because sometimes you're going through a lot of stuff and sometimes you're just coasting with life and just fixing things as you go. It depends on what's happening. And so, I don't even like to answer I'm fine to people, but I do when it's like there's too many details to get into. Thank you for asking. I appreciate your care, but I don't have much to say. Like it's not worth getting into the details because then you as a person have to dredge it up. Maybe I'm not thinking about whatever was the main issue today or this hour or this minute, and maybe I just don't want to. So it's like a weird
Or maybe
spot.
they don't, or maybe they don't even want to know. It's like a robot thing. Hey,
Yeah.
how you doing? Because my other question would be, do you really want to know? Like, do you really want to know how I feel today? And
Yeah.
I've been in a situation where I've said that and they said yes. And then I can see the gloss overness because they're not
Yeah.
really that interested, right? So then I feel like, I don't want that question. So
Well, the other the kind of the other side of that I see is that I've had somebody ask me recently, like, how am I doing? And I kind of gave them a bit of detail without giving a lot of detail, like a text amount of detail. And then they wrote back, that sounds complicated.
oh my
Yes, that's why you're asking me, right? And then there's like no back and forth, nothing. And it's like, well, then I'm just going to stick with I'm fine. And that's how we get
right.
into these mental health crises. And that's just because nobody's talking, because none of us have the energy to go through it 600 times until we find our very small circle of people who get us.
very
But
true.
isn't that why the 3 of us wanted to do this podcast? And, there are other women that, you'll meet in the future who have been part of this circle for a while because once we found other people who were willing to say, "You know what? It's pretty rough right now," and I found that people got accident fatigue about my stuff, right? It's like, oh, well, she doesn't need the cane, every single day now. So are we good? Are we done? Like we don't have to deal with this anymore. And you know, a 3-year battle with an insurance company isn't ideal for one's mental health on any given day. But I think that's why we're all here, is that if we all found each other there must be others who want to join and watch or listen to a podcast about the fact that you're not alone. We're not fine either. I mean, I'm fine some days,
Yeah.
but I don't want to be fine. I want to be fantastic, or I want to be able to text you guys and say, you're not going to believe the thing I saw today in California or, in New Mexico or wherever. I don't want to aim for fine. I want to aim. My life is short. I almost died. I want extraordinary on some days. Some days can just be like, kind of low key and nice and safe, but there have to be other women out there like us who aren't fine. And that's not the goal, is to just be fine. I don't think. Susan, you're going like this. I know I can see you. That's not your goal, is to just be fine.
No, but I think as women, that's the expectation is for us to be fine, which is not good. The whole caretaker role that every one of us take on, right? Um, is basically that's our task. Our task in life is to caregive, and then motherhood, and then now we have to have a job, we have to have our own income, we have to be self-sufficient. It's pretty much that we'll be on our own, like which we are. So we don't get a
Yeah.
break. We don't get to enjoy. So for me, the fine doesn't work either. I think we need to have, like you said, extraordinary. And where do we change the patriarchy to find ourselves? I don't know. Just things like that I think about.
Well, I think that's an important thing to think about. And that's why we're here because, you know, look at all of the trauma that you have had in your life, and you're still advocating for other people. Do you ever think, I mean, I know you want to be a change maker and an advocate, but do you ever think I would just like to sit on the couch? Like that's my goal for today. I'm just gonna sit on the couch. I'm not changing anything, and like,
I
do
would
you ever
say
get to a point?
Well,
I would
Kimothy,
say most of us do, don't we, Susan? Most of us are just like, I just like to not do anything right now.
you
And
know
then
what?
it lasts like 5 seconds.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's true, but we're military brats there, Timothy. So sitting on the couch doing nothing does not work for us, right? So
no,
that's a hard thing, right? So
yeah, the programming of uh, produce, be productive. Like, what are you doing?
yeah.
What is the all the verbs about being productive instead of just, and I said to Amy this morning when we were chatting, I said, well, I'm the only person here at this campsite. I'm going to talk to you guys today, probably do a little bit of editing about my travels for my own YouTube channel. That's all I got today. That's I'm looking at a river. I'm hoping not to get eaten by an alligator. I'm probably going to take Buddy out for he's here, so the WALK. And that's all I got.
I
That's all
think
I got.
though,
And,
I
you know,
think we need to reframe. I literally just posted this on my Instagram, which is an odd timing, but I think we
yeah,
need to reframe doing nothing because you're not doing anything. You're recharging your batteries. Whatever you're doing, it's never nothing. I don't know anybody that just sits there, blanks out, watches TV, doesn't think about a thing, doesn't get up to do anything. I think that we need to reframe the fact that we all feel bad for doing nothing on a weekend or something during a weekday, whatever.
yeah.
We need to reframe that because when we say we're doing nothing, it usually means we're doing nothing for somebody else, which
Oh,
means we've invalidated it for ourselves.
Oh,
that's a very good one. That's
That
good.
really, that just came to me, girls. That just came to me.
that was good. That was really good. I had
But it
like
is,
I
right?
had
Because we're not servicing somebody. We're
Service.
sitting there, and then you feel bad because you've just binge watched a couple of episodes on Netflix or something, and you're like, should I do something? And then you like feel bad because you like, even me, I'll carve out time and be like, this is my plan for the day. And sometimes there's nothing in quotation marks in it. It's just like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to hang out here, go mind my business. You guys do what you're going to do, and everybody's going to be happy. But I think that that's where it comes from, is that I'm not doing something for somebody else. I'm literally just sitting. And then the other part of it is that we don't have enough time to do that for ourselves. And so that time could turn into hobbies and sports and all that stuff, but we don't get enough of it. And so we're always backlogged trying to catch up on rest and fatigue and exhaustion and everything like that, that we can't ever get to the next part. I'll tell you, like, my dream is not to just binge watch Netflix when I'm on the weekend tired or whatever. Eventually I'd like to be able to crawl out of that and go back to photography, go back to whatever I'm doing, right? And it's just that I feel like I just never get enough of it. And it's so pieceworked into my life that we never get to the next level. I never level up, ladies. In self-care in that way, I should say.
That's so smart though, because the binge watching is recuperating from the week that you had. It is not fueling you for
Anything.
your creativity and,
Mhm.
in my case, your wanderlust. And but the thing that I wanted to add, because I know that Susan may have experienced this too, because with a daughter who is leaving home, the daughter who had the brain injury, so that's happy news, is also that doing something, because like I'm having this aha moment by everything that you guys are talking about, because I became like I got a divorce at the same time that my daughter went away to university, like far away to university. And then I had nothing to do for other people, right? Like I was a single mom for some of the years, and, then I had a stepdaughter, and, like, I was always doing, 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 and then I had nothing to do for other people. And I also changed my job and left a job that I had done for 25 years. So, kind of like you're binge watching on a weekend, I went through a really difficult recovery from being a workaholic, busy, busy mom, and then nothing. Then nothing. That's also hard
Yeah,
when nobody needs you anymore, because I think there's an ego thing sometimes with, "Oh, but they need me. They need me."
I need you, Timothy, for what
I
it's
know
worth.
you do. I need you too. And I need Susan. And I need to know from Susan what you think of that, because with your daughter leaving home and you've cared for her for, you know, well, you cared for her pretty much hands on for 10 years. Do you feel, this is maybe a terrible question, do you feel a little bit of relief, or do you feel a gap in your own worthiness that you're not needed anymore?
Well, here's how I will address that. Um,
That's
I'll
very
caveat by saying
politician
that,
like.
yeah, so brain injury that she has had, which is catastrophic, there will be no rest. However, the
Yeah.
distance, because she's now lives, about 20 minutes from me, has allowed space where I didn't have that. It was busy concerning making sure that she was feeling good because with brain injury, high levels of anxiety. So to dealing with that. So that's how I'd caveat. It's just changed. And then of course I have another daughter that she's in competitive hockey. So I put one indulgence into the other. And then I have this son that doesn't need me at all, but I wish I could spend more time with him. So I the time is slivered. Like I like Amy said, like we as North Americans, I'll call it, or I know we're Canadians, but we are doing it wrong. Like the Europeans, they carve out time. Like we should learn more from other
Oh,
cultures to be able to prioritize ourselves. Um, we can go on to another show talking about how other cultures um, feel about mental health because we
yeah,
all are.
that's a great idea. That's a great idea, because what popped into my head is when, I was in, Paris. I know that sounds ridiculously self-indulgent. See, I'm almost ashamed to say I've been to Paris 4 times, right? Instead of I paid for myself to go to Paris. But I met this guy, through a friend, because we were there on a military junket thing, and he asked me about how many times a week I go to the spa, and I said, "A week?" And I'm thinking it's a French translation thing that I'm just not understanding, like, "You mean, like, chaque semaine? Like, a
Yeah, yeah,
week?"
yeah.
And he he said that his wife goes to the spa once a week, and I
Hmm.
I literally I've remembered it to this day because I couldn't get my head around it, like,
Hmm.
a week. I haven't been to the spa in a couple of years, I don't think. Yeah, I think probably, and, we all love that place probably near us in Ottawa. We probably shouldn't do brand, celebration, but, the place with the hot springs on the other side of the river. And, I used to love to go there every couple months, but then life got busy, right? So what slides? Us.
Yes,
Us, you
yes.
know, us. So, yeah, I, uh, I don't have any answers, but you, 2 have certainly filled me with a couple epiphanies this morning. I'm now I'm gonna have to rest up from the holy moly.
Rename our show the Epiphany Makers.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly.
I think, yeah, we don't have any answers for you other than, we're here for you, but, yeah, the epiphany makers. Um, because, um Susan, one of the things that, I admire about you is that you are strong. But when it comes to vulnerability, isn't that really a choice that we each have to make, is putting ourselves out there into, like, saying, as Amy says, I'm not doing okay, you know, as she tells me to say sometimes. I
I
don't
would
mean she says that every
Maybe,
day, but it was
yeah.
like, it's okay that you're not okay today. Okay. That's human, you know, what we do.
I think that people that would get that are the people like ourselves, right? The ones that kind of shelter themselves and live in that perfect house and want to keep everything perfect. They don't want to change that, right? And so, one of the vulnerabilities, I don't mind being vulnerable when I can control it, if that makes sense. And so when I go back, you know what I mean? So my vulnerability is controlled. I just give a
Yeah.
little bit, but I will go deeper if I feel safe, I guess. And when I think about the experience at the university, um, that's one of the things that got lost on me is that I felt so embarrassed that I made myself vulnerable, right? So my vulnerability is controlled.
I get
Yeah. And yet imagine, so I've often said this to some people, imagine if you were giving this advice to me, is that, um, if I was feeling badly about, I spoke out and I shouldn't have, attracted attention or, whatever the case may be. Um, the advice that I would get from Susan is much different than the advice that you're giving to yourself, right?
Well,
Well,
Is
it's
that
easier.
you're not being gentle with yourself.
No, it's easier said than done as well. I think that's where that comes, right? It's like
Yeah.
I give all sorts of advice all day long, and it's legit advice, I think, but it's
Yeah.
hard to take on your own advice. I mean, there's a lot of things I do in my personal life and my day job that I should be doing more so for myself as well. I know how to educate people on it. I know what to do with it, but it's hard when you're in your own life handling your own challenges at the same time. Um,
well,
Yeah,
because
and sorry, go ahead, Susan.
I was just gonna say, because you can't dedicate a segment of time for that one mental health issue. You have all these balls in the air. So how do you do it? That's, I guess, how I would say, because you can't isolate the problem or the mental health issue in isolation of all the balls that you're juggling. So
because it's all intertwined. We're holistic individuals, and I think that's why we have so many issues with medical systems and all the other things, right? It's like we need to be treated as holistic, and one thing that we're dealing with mentally is intertwined with another thing, is intertwined with another thing, and as you start to heal them, they start to come apart, but they're all kind of intertwined together as it is.
yeah.
Oh, and, you know, live on this podcast, we just experienced that because I just went to unzip my hoodie, right? Because it's starting to get nicer here in this part of Florida. And my immediate thought was, don't just start ripping it off because I'm having a hot flash. And yet, what are we here talking about? And I didn't want to be obvious about the fact that my face is about to go pink because, we're sitting out here because aren't we so programmed to just like, don't make a fuss, don't, take your sweater off in the middle of it. And meanwhile, we're here talking about this very topic. So there, I've taken my hoodie off and I feel a lot better now. But I instantly was trying to figure out a way how to get my hoodie off without you guys noticing because I'm having a hot flash and we're here to talk about women and mental health.
I
But
think we're
it's
just
just
really used to censoring ourselves.
Yes.
well, that's just it. It's like twing, that it and we have to learn not to be. Hopefully that's what this podcast is going to do is um give people a place to feel heard, but also we need to unprogram ourselves a little bit from everything that we've been taught, right?
Mhm.
I agree. And so building a community builds,
Yeah.
once we have this community, it makes changes, right? Because we're not going to put up with having, what we've been told, how we dress, how we have our hair. If we wear red lipstick, if we don't wear red lipstick, like where you walk at night. Like we can start listing off all the different things that women have to face and like our rules and regulations, because I don't think men have any rules. Like,
Yeah. I don't think they much care about things like, because which side of the camera? Whatever side, I've got the silver thing happening here. And that was an actual conversation with the hairstylist that I've been with for probably 25 years is, you know, honey, what do you want to do about it? I said, well, I don't know. I kind of like it. And how can we be having these conversations about, not that it was his fault, it was my fault, is, well, I don't want to be a 57-year-old who doesn't, kind of show that there's gray coming in because that's ridiculous. Well, says who? Did you
Yeah.
see what Cher wore to the 50th anniversary of Saturday Night Live? You think Cher cares? you know, so yeah, I think that's a great point, is we also have to realize that some of this we're doing to ourselves.
Yeah.
Because we've been programmed, right? We've been programmed. It's kind of like leaving a cult. We
Well,
have to,
it is.
yeah, it kind of is, right? We have to deprogram ourselves. Um, yeah. And yet, I don't know, Susan, like, how do you think that you keep your compassion? Because, it's a hard knock life. Someone should write a song about that. But how do
Uh,
you keep your compassion? Because that's what you do for a living, is find ways to make life better for other people. So how are you still gentle?
I have no idea. I think it's just who I am. I can't come up with an answer. Like I think women have that compassion trait, whether it's like what I heard actually was kind of funny, is that when we're young, we have all this estrogen, and so that's kind of our programming. That's where it starts. And then so we're always caring. We care for our significant others, then we decide to have children, we're always caring for them. We go, and then when we get into our 50s, we have no more estrogen left and we don't give a shit. We're saying, what about me? What about me? This is where I
Amy,
think
you're gonna Amy's gonna love that phase. She's gonna love the don't give a shit phase. We
yeah,
just
because I
don't.
think that's right. I think we've been awakened. This whole estrogen thing has kind of duped us into thinking that that's our job, and Timothy, because we're in our 50s, that right now it's like, what about me? Like, what about me? That's what I think it's all about. Is so for me, I want to warn these young people. I tell my daughter, I tell people in their 40s, like, hey, you know, things get much different when you get into your 50s and you're through your menopause. So I don't know.
I can see Susan driving down the street, like literally with a megaphone, just yelling it out the street. My estrogen's gone and I don't give a damn.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a kind one. I like to use other profound language, but anyways, yeah,
Yeah,
I think
so do we.
yeah. So me, I'm trying to figure out what I want. And Timothy, I don't know. Are you at that phase too? Like, what do I really want? I want
I
a better
I
world,
I got in my car and I drove to California, so, I'm working on it, but,
She's trying to figure
you
it
know
out.
well, because what I, uh, can say about that, because I mean, it's just a long story that nobody needs to hear right now, but, um, you know, there I was struggling under the weight of paying for where I lived, and I have not had a settlement from the insurance company, and we're approaching 3 years. And as you both know, I in that car accident was my camper that was connected to the back of my vehicle. So I started to get this idea about, I have an SUV. I can still go and work from the road. And the biggest challenge for me in giving up what I call my bricks and sticks house was, people are gonna think I'm crazy. And then I got to the point where I thought, I don't much care. And
exactly.
I think, Susan, to what you're talking about, is I couldn't have done that in my 40s, couldn't have done that in my 30s. I mean, I was still parenting, actively at that point, but, I had to work through what people were gonna think
Right.
about the fact that she's driving to California from Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. What? And it was about the fact that I was just blowing the doors off my life.
I think that's fantastic to see for someone looking in the window in your life. I think that's fantastic. It's almost admirable. Like I,
Well,
yeah, no, no, really it is, because a lot of people won't do that. A lot of people will not chase their dreams because of their security with their boring life. So,
truly, truly, it's because I had friends like the two of you, because some of the people from my previous life were the people that just think she's lost her ever loving mind. And it was because of authentic friends like you, I think, who were like, is this going to make you happy? Not sure, but I'm going to go find out.
Yeah.
And, there were certain times near the forest fires of Los Angeles, for example, which I was very close to, where I thought, maybe I am going a little loopy. This doesn't seem like it was a good idea. But I think that that's part of it, is that we have to find our people.
Yeah.
Like, that's our job, is to find our people, because otherwise we get pressure from other people that
Mhm.
isn't great for your mental health. I
No.
mean, some people just wanted to be who I was before, right? And Susan, as you know, with your daughter, that's not going to happen, you
No.
know.
You
It's
can't, once it's out, you just can't put it back in that shell. You have to just keep moving
no.
forward and kind of morph into a different type of butterfly, I guess, is where I'm going with this. Like you need to, once you get too far out of something, regardless of what it is, you can't go backwards. You have to keep going forwards. And that could look like you continue on your journey here exactly how you planned. It could look like you changed course, which you did. You could look like I am going back to Ottawa and miss Amy. Who knows, right? Who knows?
Well,
But
that's happening. We know that's happening. We
I
have
mean,
campus
early. I mean,
we
early. You
have
have to be able to be, you have to be
yeah,
fluctuant in your life because if you're super rigid,
yeah.
it's everything's going to feel painful all the time.
So
And,
Timothy, I have a
Susan,
question. Sorry,
yeah,
I have a
no, you
question
go
for
ahead.
you.
I was just gonna thank you for your pointing out that you need community, because you 2 are my community. So, that helps. So,
Yeah.
What were you going to say,
yeah.
Susan?
All right, so
So
what's your question?
my question to you, Timothy, because you've done something that's so, in your mind, crazy, but for me, I think, wow, that's amazing. Are you happy that you've done this journey? What I guess the question I'm asking is, you had this dream or this thought, that you were going to, live in your car and go to California. Are you glad you did it? Like, was it worth it, or is it worth it? Like, that kind of
It
stuff.
is so worth it that all I think about in terms of my living arrangements going forward is that when I come back to Ottawa, if the insurance company has not settled this, what kind of bigger vehicle can I get? Um, for the fact that, pretty much they blew out my finances, right? What kind of bigger vehicle can I get? Because I'm not going back. And I don't mean to Ottawa, I mean going back to the stress of a mortgage and being injured and all of that kind of stuff. And for me, I'm free and I can't go back. That's the problem, ladies, that as the oldest one, I think I'm the oldest one here. Susan, when's your birthday?
No, my birthday's tomorrow, so no.
We're
Yep.
celebrating your birthday.
Mhm.
Um, so you can't put that genie back in the bottle. It's I have experienced freedom, and I have also been able to deepen my relationships by choosing the ones that I will put my energy into, and then just wishing well, in my heart, those who kind of let me slip away a while back. I'm not bitter about it. I just became a different person, and that wasn't convenient for some people,
What
you
I
know.
mean, that's what we're all
Amen.
here to do is grow and change and learn.
Yeah.
I think with that note, we're going to say thank you, Susan, for coming on today. I really appreciate it. I know Timothy really appreciates it. Your story is amazing. And thank you for being vulnerable here with us in this space. I do appreciate it. And I hope that the ladies watching and the gentlemen who join us also have been able to grab tidbits out of our conversation today. And I want to welcome everybody back to the Inner Shift next week. So thanks very much. Have a good week, everyone.